I sometimes struggle to afford food. That's a real quote from a member of Gen Z, just trying to get by in today's economy. And it's a story we're hearing more and more, and it begs a massive question.
So let's get right into it. Is Gen Z truly the poorest generation we've seen in a long time? Or is there something else going on beneath the surface? To figure that out, we've got to start with an accusation that you've probably heard thrown around a lot.
You know the one I'm talking about. The stereotype that paints an entire generation as, well, lazy, unmotivated, or just plain entitled. Let's really dig into where this idea even comes from. And here's the clash, right? On one side, you have managers saying Gen Z is difficult, they lack a traditional work ethic. But if you talk to Gen Z, they'll tell you this isn't about laziness at all. It's a complete shift in what they value. They want a life outside of work. They've seen that company loyalty is a two-way street that's often, well, a one-way street. And yeah, they've kind of adopted this you only live once mindset in response to it all. This whole disconnect has given rise to these new workplace trends you see everywhere. Things like quiet quitting or bare minimum Mondays. And it's not just here. In China, they have a similar idea called lying flat. And the result of all this? A pretty staggering statistic. 3 out of every 4 managers say Gen Z is the most difficult generation they've had to work with.
So that's the perception, right? But is it actually fair? Or are these attitudes in the workplace really just a symptom of a much, much bigger economic reality that this generation is being slammed with? Let's get into the actual numbers.
Okay, reality check number 1. If there's one piece of the old school dream that feels totally impossible for Gen Z, it's this one: owning a home.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It says it all. For baby boomers, it took maybe 2 or 3 years of their entire income to buy a house. Now look at Gen Z. We're talking 6 or 7 years. The goalposts haven't just moved. They're in a completely different stadium.
And in some places, the numbers are just, frankly, absurd. Take Sydney, Australia. You would need to save every single penny you earn, no food, no rent, nothing, for 14 years just to buy a house. It's an impossible equation.
Okay, but here is where the story gets a little weird. A bit of a plot twist. Despite everything we just said, the data shows Gen Z is actually buying homes at a slightly higher rate than millennials were at the exact same age. So what on earth is going on? How is that even possible?
Well, it looks like a few unique factors kind of created a perfect tiny window of opportunity. Some were able to jump on those record low mortgage rates during the pandemic. The explosion of remote work meant they could live in cheaper areas. And let's face it, as digital natives, they're just better at using technology to hunt for deals. All right, let's pivot to our next reality check, the job market. Because on the surface, you hear all the time that things look pretty good, right? Low unemployment numbers are always in the headlines. But that official story, it just doesn't line up with how a lot of people are actually feeling about their job security.
So here's something you might not know. The unemployment rate you always see on the news, that's called U3. It's the official number, but it conveniently leaves out people who've just given up looking for a job. The real unemployment rate, U6, actually includes those people, and it paints a much, much more honest and, frankly, bleaker picture.
And it's not just our opinion. As economist Peter Schiff points out, if you want to do a true apples-to-apples comparison, you have to look at today's real U6 rate and compare it to the way things were measured before 1994. And when you do that, our current job market is actually weaker than it was for most of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Now, this chart looks like great news, right? Gen Z's wages are growing at 13%, which is almost double the rate of older workers. Fantastic. Well, hold on. The big catch is that they are starting from a much, much lower salary in the first place. But here it is. This is the real gut punch. Even with those pay raises, it's not even close to enough to keep up with the highest inflation we've seen in 40 years. So your paycheck might be getting bigger, but what it can actually buy is shrinking every single month. And that brings us to our third and final reality check, and this might be the heaviest one of all: the crushing weight of debt, especially student debt, that is holding this generation down before they even get started. If you want a snapshot of the pure desperation that student debt causes, just look at this. A recent survey found that nearly 40% of graduates would willingly go to jail for a week if it meant their student loans would be completely erased. That says it all.
And just look at how fast this debt is growing. In just 1 year, while boomers were actually paying down their debt, Gen Z saw their debt levels explode by over 15%. It is just not sustainable. So, what does this all add up to? When you factor everything in, you get this number. Once you adjust for inflation, the average member of Gen Z is making $7,000 less per year than someone their exact same age did just a decade ago. Their economic foundation is literally crumbling away.
Okay, so let's bring it all home. We started with this accusation of laziness. But after looking at the actual economic data, a very, very different picture starts to emerge, doesn't it? Look, this isn't about a generation lacking effort. Gen Z walked straight into an economic perfect storm. We're talking rampant inflation, a housing market totally disconnected from reality, insane levels of debt, and wages that just don't buy what they used to. But here's the thing, this generation isn't just taking it lying down. Their response has been incredibly resourceful. Almost 40% have a side hustle. They're strategically job hopping to get better pay. They're questioning an old school work culture that just doesn't work for them anymore. This isn't laziness. This is adaptation. It's survival. Now, just for a little historical perspective, is this the absolute worst any generation has ever had it? Well, probably not. Think about the lost generation, born around the turn of the 20th century. They had to deal with World War I, then the Great Depression, and then they had to send their own kids to fight in World War II. Now, this isn't to take anything away from Gen Z's struggles, but it's important to see it in the larger context of generational challenges. So what's the final verdict here? Is Gen Z just a victim of circumstance facing the toughest economic headwinds in decades? Or is what we're actually seeing, the quiet quitting, the side hustles, the questioning of the old rules, is that actually the blueprint for a new, more resilient way to build a life? That's the real question we have to ask.